Obviously, it's Independence Day tomorrow. Happy Independence Day. As Pastor Jim was sharing, this is a great holiday to remember the sacrifice of our soldiers, the sacrifice of our founding fathers when they declared our nation's independence, the birth of our nation, if you will. And one of the things that I want to remind everyone is that this nation was formed not just for freedom from governmental systems, but freedom from religious systems. There were people that came to the United States that founded the United States because of oppression on how they followed God. And so that's something that is worth remembering. You and I have the freedom to be in these seats today because of what our founding fathers did hundreds of years ago and declared that we are a nation, one nation under God, and we have the freedom to worship God how we choose. So thank you for choosing to worship with us this morning. If you're new here, I am glad you're here. What we are doing right now is going through the book of Romans. Today I'm going to be talking about Romans chapter 8, verses 18 through 25. And one of the things to keep in mind with the book of Romans is that Romans is a letter to believers. So sometimes we look at the Bible and we kind of get this idea that this is for those heathens, right? Those people that don't know Jesus. You should listen up because the Bible has something to say about that. Well, the Bible does have something to say about that, and it's saying it to you and to me, to people who have made the choice already, if you have made that choice, to follow Jesus. So this is not just guidelines for the unbeliever. This is what it is saying to you and I as the believer, as the one who has already chosen to follow Christ. So let's not forget that. Now, one of the things that we really love doing at City Church is going through the Bible line by line, and this is why we're going through the whole book of Romans together, is because we believe that there is value in understanding the context of Scripture. So that's why, I'm teaching verses 18 through 25 this morning, but before that, Pastor Daniel, Pastor Jim, Pastor David, and myself, we've all been teaching through the book of Romans up to this point. So I want to talk for a moment about the context of where we're at. Romans 7, which is the chapter just before, is talking a lot about the spirit versus the flesh. So that idea that we have this spirit from God that is fighting against our sinful flesh, the flesh wanting to follow the things, the selfish desires that really aren't healthy for anyone, certainly not healthy for ourselves, and there's this struggle between those two. Now, the reassurance is that there is freedom from sin through Jesus, but the hard thing is that even though you may believe in Jesus, there is still that struggle because we have not yet reached eternity. We've not yet reached a place where God is going to perfect everything and remove that sinful nature from us. So this is still a struggle. Romans 8 speaks to that struggle, and it tells us to live by the Spirit and kill the flesh. Last week, Pastor Daniel challenged us, saying, what sin in your life do you need to kill? All of us have sin in our lives. The Bible tells us that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Now, maybe there's not a particular sin area that you're aware of at the moment, but I would encourage you, pray and ask God, because we want to grow more and more like Christ, and there is sin in your life that must be killed. Romans 8 also spoke to being adopted as children of God. Now, adoption is an amazing thing. If you have ever participated in adoption, it's very moving, very, very emotional, even to witness the adoption process as someone is adopted, because there's just such a love there. And adoption was a common practice during Roman times as well. I want to read a couple verses here just at the end of what Pastor Daniel taught last week as we talk about just a little bit adoption. It says, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. Now, we don't like that suffering part. We do really like that glorified part, but the suffering part is still part of it. This is part of that struggle between the flesh and the Spirit. But I want to point out that we are called heirs, and heirs have an inheritance. We're going to get into that a little bit more today, but I want you right now to get ready. I don't know if you've received something from God yet this morning or not. I hope you did during worship because that one is an amazing experience as we came into the presence of God. But right now, if you are not expecting, I invite you to expect because you are an heir if you have chosen to follow Jesus Christ. You are an heir, and you have an inheritance. Now, with that, let me talk a little bit about inheritance under Roman law. Because you see, in our modern culture, you have to wait until your parent is dead to get that inheritance, right? Well, Paul is in a Roman culture, writing to a church in Rome, where they understand that under Roman law, inheritance is shared with the parent while that parent is living. Do we serve a living God? We serve a living God. We don't have to wait for that inheritance. We get to partake in it right now. So I invite you to expect this morning, to expect God to do something in your life, because I know that He wants to, if you are ready to let Him. I'm going to go ahead and read through the next few verses here, then we're going to come back and break them down just a little at a time. Verse 18 in Romans 8. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. So those are the main verses that we're covering this morning. As I said, I want to go back through them and break them down just a little bit. I think you guys can tell, going through those verses, there are a couple themes here that stand out: suffering and hope, right? Now, I already talked just a bit about suffering. We're going to get into that a little bit more. But there's this idea of hope, this idea of glorification. What does this mean? Now, we have this kind of pie-in-the-sky idea of eternity, right? Oh, someday with Jesus in eternity. But what does that really mean? What are we hoping for? So again, I invite you to expect to receive from God today and to ask Him to show you what you can hope for. So again, back to verse 18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. So it's this present time idea, right? So the sufferings we're currently experiencing are limited to this present window of time. Now, God exists outside of time. So the Scripture tells us that 1,000 years is as a day to the Lord, or a day is as 1,000 years. It makes no difference to Him. So what we are currently experiencing, it doesn't really matter to God. And not in that He doesn't care, but that He is outside of that, and our suffering is limited to this little finite time that God exists out of, and that in eternity we will exist without as well. And it's just a limited duration. So that's one of the things that we hope for, is that this is, as bad as it may be, it's limited. It is a present time. And we are suffering from living in a fallen world. Now, this is death. This is job loss. This is addiction. This is other sins in our life, or that have been caused by sins in the lives of those around us, and they hurt. I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced one of those things at some point or another. And we have to take comfort in God that He is the one that can get us through that suffering. And it is difficult. And we've had so much suffering, even within the last couple weeks, as we've been talking with people in the body. And man, it just about brings you to tears, what people are going through. And it's hard. We also are suffering from persecution. Now, persecution is not something that we know very much about in the United States, if we're honest, right? Now, again, maybe our founding fathers knew something of persecution. Maybe those who initially came over from Europe understood persecution for their faith a little bit, but we really don't. I mean, maybe somebody makes fun of us, maybe somebody thinks we look foolish, but we don't really understand what persecution means today. There are those in the world that do understand what persecution means today. There are actually 40 countries right now. This is from a report just from this year from Voice of the Martyrs that are considered restricted countries. And this is from their own document, so I'm just going to read this to you. These are countries in which government-sanctioned circumstances or anti-Christian laws lead to Christians being harassed, imprisoned, killed, or deprived of possessions or liberties because of their witness. This is also where government policy or practice prevents Christians from obtaining Bibles or other Christian literature. There are 40 countries in the world right now where you could be in jail just for sitting in these seats, just for owning a Bible. That's persecution. That is what it means to be persecuted, to suffer for your faith. Now, in addition to these 40 restricted countries, there are 28 other countries that are marked as either hostile or being monitored. Basically, it's not legal to persecute Christians in those countries, but not a lot's happening about it. In these 40 countries, it's actually legal to persecute Christians. There is no legal action taken against someone who kills someone because of their faith, at least if you're a Christian. Now, I don't say this because I want you to feel bad and, man, maybe I should really understand what's going on in my world a little bit better. And you should understand what's going on in your world a little bit better. But this is an invitation to pray. This is an opportunity for you to recognize you have brothers and sisters around the world that need your prayers desperately, that are suffering because of persecution. And so I invite you to pray, to remember them in your prayers. You can actually go online to persecution.org. This is the Voice of the Martyrs website, and you can get a list of these countries and the specific needs going on in each of them. If that's on your heart, then please go ahead and research that, and you can get that list so that you can be praying for these brothers and sisters in need, and if God stirs you, to support them in other ways as well. So they are really suffering for their faith. What is their hope? I got to ask myself, are they reading the same Bible that we're reading? Because what I see people hoping in around here, and I don't mean City Church specifically, I mean in our nation, what I see people hoping in our nation is very, very different than what I believe that these people in these 40 restricted countries are hoping for. Why would you allow yourself to be thrown in jail, to be tortured, to lose your family, if you don't have hope? So what is their hope in? Revelation chapter 21 gives us a picture of what that's going to be like, of what our hope should be in. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away." We're going to be in a place where things are so good, you won't even cry at the memory. Does that even sound believable? I mean, the suffering that we've already experienced in this world, I can look back, I lost my father about 9 years ago. I had a great relationship with my dad. I know not everybody has, but even now, there are times when I look back and I miss him. I get teared up. That memory is still painful. I'm still feeling that loss. What is it going to be like to be in a place where even the memory doesn't bring us to a tear? What's that going to be like? One of my favorite Christian authors is John Eldredge, and he's helping us understand that we have a skewed perspective, oftentimes, of what eternity looks like. He wrote, "Our enemy has whispered an even more diabolical lie, harder to dispel because it is veiled in religious imagery. Heaven will be a never-ending church service in the sky. All those silly images of clouds and harps. It sounds like hell to me." Now, don't get me wrong, I love worshiping here. But has anybody ever, and no condemnation, I promise, have you ever thought of this church service in the sky and thought, oh my gosh? To be honest, sometimes it sounds a little boring, right? Maybe it doesn't sound boring to you. Maybe you love being at church. And if you do, I'm glad. And I love being here. But I know that there have been times in my life where I thought, ooh, hope you got something better, Jesus. He continued, we have dreamed better dreams than God can dream. We have written stories that have a better ending than God has provided. It cannot be. If we can come up with a happily ever after that is better than God's, I don't think he's God. So the problem is not with God's plan. The problem is with our understanding of God's plan. God has something better than you can possibly imagine. What's it going to look like? Well, we have scriptures that tell us images of what it's going to be like. We have an idea there will be worship because we're so thankful to be in the presence of the Lord. We're going to have relationship with him like we've not had before. But I can't tell you for sure. And if I could, I don't know that it would really be what God has for us because, again, I can't imagine anything better than God has put together. It's something that he has for us. In Matthew 25, Jesus gives us a little bit of an idea. He says, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Now, I know it's up for debate how old the world is, right? Some people believe in a literal 6-day creation and say that the world is approximately 6,000 or 7,000 years old, and that's the time it took. There are others who say, well, you know what, you can't interpret this to mean a kind of a form of evolution where God has just, through millennia, taken the time to create, and still attributing all of it to God, right? So, either way, I don't care. This is not a salvation issue, but here's the thing. Whether it's thousands of years, hundreds of thousands, or millions of years, what is that place going to be like if it has been prepared for us from the foundation of the world? You know how long it took him to build Disneyland? 1 year. What can God do with thousands and unlimited resources? Just dream on that for a moment. What are you hoping in? What is our hope? We have these people persecuted in other countries, and I think maybe they understand eternity just a little bit better than we do, because otherwise they would not be suffering the way they are suffering right now. So what is our hope in? Are we looking forward to eternity? Or are we settling for what man can give us here and now? The sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. It's better than you can imagine. It's better than you've ever dreamed. And it is coming. Verse 19, for the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. So, why is creation waiting? I thought creation was good. If we look back in the creation in Genesis, it says it was good, right? So why is creation having this longing? If you go back and you read through the creation account in Genesis chapter 1, after each day, God says, and it was good. And he creates man, and God says, it was very good. I kind of figure if God says it's good, then, that's probably good, right? So what happened? The fall. Adam sinned, as did Eve, as would you or I or anyone else. And this is what happened. This was the consequence. This is God speaking to Adam. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and men, this isn't a sin. Listen to your wives. It's okay. This wasn't the sinful part. You have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you. You shall not eat of it. This is the rebellion. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now obviously this is God cursing man for his rebellion, and we get to live with the consequence of that. That means that we have to toil, that we have to suffer, not because God said you're going to suffer, but because we chose to rebel. And again, you would have rebelled, I would have rebelled. And now we must suffer the consequences of that rebellion. But this is also a curse on the earth. And I believe we can see this. You look at natural disasters, you look at earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, all these things that destroy. I don't think that's part of God's plan. I've got to believe that things were intended for better. And you look at this in the light of God's gift to man. In Genesis chapter 1, God also tells them that they have dominion over the earth. God has let them rule it. And he said, I give you every green plant for food. God has gifted all of this to them, and man has spurned the gift. And now, because of that, the earth is cursed. Because of man's rebellion. Because man was responsible for the well-being of creation. God gave us that responsibility. Now, of course, it is his creation. I can't create like he can create. I can imitate his creation, but he is the creator. But he chose to let you and I have rule over the earth. So we were responsible for its well-being, and we blew it. So as I was thinking about this, I thought of a story when my brother John was first in college. And he was in college about 2 hours away, driving back and forth from home to college every other weekend kind of thing, do laundry, eat real food, that kind of thing. And he had a car that had a little bit of a problem with keeping oil. And he knew this. And so he would kind of keep some oil in the car. He'd pour it in. You may have had a car like this yourself. These things happen, right? It's an old car. It happens. Well, he starts driving, and that low oil light comes on. He doesn't think much of it. Keeps driving. Lets it go even for a couple days without putting anything in it. And lo and behold, he is driving on one of these visits home and blows a baseball-sized hole in his engine. Who'd have thunk it, right? Now, you can't blame the car for that problem, right? That was his problem. It was something that he had been entrusted with, and he failed to maintain it. Just like we were entrusted with the earth, and we failed to maintain it, that we failed to keep it as God had instructed us. And so, just as my brother's engine suffered because of neglect, creation suffers because of our neglect in following God's law, in keeping his commandments. It's our fault that creation is in the state that it's in. It's not God's. God pointed out the consequences to us, but we are the ones who made it happen. Continuing in verse 20, it says, "For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God." So creation is subjected to futility. Again, our fault. God is the one who let us know the consequences of that. But there is hope. There is hope for creation from the glory of the children of God. What does that mean? Well, I believe that this means that creation will be restored. We read in Revelation that there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, right? So just as God is going to restore our bodies, we're going to have heavenly bodies. We're going to experience eternity as God meant for us to live all along, but we rebelled against. Creation is going to be in that same situation. Now, creation doesn't have the Spirit of God, right? I'm not saying go hug a tree. If you like trees, that's okay, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that creation's restoration is dependent upon ours. Because as the overseers of creation, as the ones to whom it was entrusted, creation has to wait for us to receive our glory before it can receive its glory, before it can receive the fullness of what God created it to be. Now remember, heirs have an inheritance. So when you and I receive the full inheritance of what God has promised us, when Jesus returns and we get to live forever with him in eternity, we have glorified bodies with him. When we receive that fullness of inheritance, creation can receive it as well. Now again, that inheritance is not limited to that time frame. We can begin to experience that right now. And this is why I believe we even catch glimpses of God's glory here and now. Have you ever just been somewhere and seen an amazing beach, right? Hey, like that one that's, 45 minutes away? This is Hilton Head, guys. Isn't that amazing? Wow. If you have ever had one of those moments where the word breathtaking is used for, right? This is a glimpse of what was meant to be. This is a picture that God has given us, I believe, of what is intended for us. See, because we know sometimes we can have it pretty good right now. Sometimes it looks like this, right? Things are going well. Kids are behaving. You got a cool vacation. And man, it's that kind of day, right? It's amazing, breathtaking. But here's the problem. This is corrupted. As good as this looks, it is not the end goal. And if you are making it the end goal, you are missing out. Because this is corrupted. This is just the imperfect picture that we see right now. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians that we see as in a mirror dimly. You know, it's like if you've taken a shower and the mirror's all foggy and you're trying to wipe it so you can see and it's just not working. That's kind of what we're experiencing right now. But then, Paul says, I will see face to face. So right now, we have this dim mirror. Man, that looks pretty good for a dim mirror. But it is not anywhere near what God has for us. So what does God have for us? The glory of the children of God. The glory of the children of God. And again, I wish I could show you a picture of this. But the truth is that there is nothing on this earth that can really, truly show you what this is about. That's a beautiful image I had on the screen there. I would love to vacation there. But that is so short of what God has for us. So what does God have in store for us? What are you hoping for? Is your hope in eternity? Or is your hope for the next paycheck, the next weekend? Don't get me wrong, I think you should celebrate this weekend. I think you should have a good time. But if that's all that you're looking forward to, you are missing the point. Verse 22, for we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And I believe we see some of these groanings, as I mentioned, in natural disasters and the other things that are the decay and the destruction of this world. Now, I'm not saying that global climate change is upon us and we're all about to die, but maybe consider that the creation, the earth, is suffering just as you and I suffer. And that these things that we see that, man, they're hard things, well, that's on us. That's because of our rebellion. But the hope is in Jesus. It says, not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. Now, when we look back earlier in Romans 8, it tells us that we are already heirs. We're already children of God. So we're waiting for the adoption as sons. And so where's the divide here? I believe that we get to have some of the benefits right now of adoption as sons, just as in our culture and in Roman times, in the process of adoption, you get to have a few of the benefits. You get to look forward to the fullness of what that's going to be, but we have not yet achieved it. If we already had the full status, the full benefits of sonship, well, then we wouldn't be here anymore, right? This is what's coming when Jesus returns. This is what we're going to have in eternity, is the full benefits of adoption. But it's not here yet. We don't have all the benefits of adoption yet, but they are coming. Now, I want to talk a bit about salvation versus sanctification, because you could look at this and think that since we don't have those benefits, maybe we don't have salvation. But there's a clear distinction between the two. Salvation is when you choose to make Jesus the Lord of your life, and I hope that you have. When you choose to let Him sit on the throne of your heart and surrender all that you have to Him. Sanctification is what this is talking about. Sanctification is that process of becoming more like Jesus. So in that process of sanctification, that process of holiness, we're going to struggle. We have to work through the things in this fallen world, in this corrupted, incomplete picture. It's going to be hard. But the promise is that we already have the first fruits. Now, what are the first fruits of the Spirit? Let me give you a bit of history, a bit of context, if you will, for what first fruits would mean to this audience. So you have to remember, especially at this time, there is a huge agricultural society. They did not have laptops and iPhones and all these other things that they needed technicians for, so a huge number of your population were people that were farming. It's agriculture. And so the idea of first fruits, that's the very first of your crop, right? So the very, very first of your crop, it's the promise of more to come. And in Jewish culture, God had established that those first fruits were actually supposed to be a gift to him. Whew, God, what if the rest of the crop doesn't come through? But that was the point, that you're trusting in him. So God, it says, has given us the first fruits of the Spirit. So this is the first installment of a promise. It's a promise of more to come. Just as when the harvest is coming in and you begin to see the first ear of corn bloom and you begin to take a little bit here and there and knowing that this is just the first of more to come. The great thing with God is that there's not going to be some natural disaster, some storm, something that comes and ruins our crop, because he says that we get to experience this right now. In Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, it lists for us what these first fruits are. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law." So what God is telling us is that right now, you and I have the opportunity to experience love, to experience joy and peace and patience, to experience kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness and self-control. Now, I know that we're not always experiencing those things, but the promise is that we can right now. These are the first fruits of the promise to come. The Holy Spirit enables you to have these things right now. So the question is, man, that sounds really nice, but how? I would love to have more joy, more love, more peace, more patience. Well, the answer is in verse 24 of that passage. "And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires." So the way that we get to experience the fullness of what God has given us is to kill the sin in our life, to crucify the flesh with its passions and desires. This is what Paul has been talking about in Romans so far, is that if you want that fullness of life, if you want that first fruit, that first installment of the greater things to come, then you have to say no to sin. You have to kill it in your life. You cannot stand for it. That is not what God intended for you. You must crucify the flesh with its passions and desires. This is the redemption of our bodies. This is the process of sanctification, and this is how we get to begin to experience what it means to be children of God. If you're not experiencing that right now, I would love to pray with you. This is an opportunity for you to have the fullness of what God intended for you to have. But it starts with you making a choice, a conscious choice, to say no to those areas that destroy your life. Verse 24, "For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees?" Now, this makes sense, right? If you can see it, certainly you're not hoping for it. Man, I really hope that there's a chair in that aisle there. You know, there already is. I don't have to hope for it. So we hope for things that are not yet seen. It's kind of like, when you're a kid, you look forward to Christmas, right? You hope that you got that gift. You really, really hope for it. And you continue to hope until Christmas morning, and hopefully that hope is fulfilled. Hopefully mom and dad heard you say enough times that you wanted this. And parents, I have heard some of the things that your kids hope for. Either you have far more money than I thought you did, or your kids have big dreams. Either way, that's a blessing, right? But we need to look forward with hope to what is coming. So, do we hope for the eternal? Again, this is just changing our entire mindset. Do we hope for the eternal? Do we look forward to what's coming? Or do we settle for the immediate? And I feel like most of the time we fall into this camp. I feel like we settle for the immediate. We have this instant gratification society, right? Microwave society, if you will. Man, 30 seconds for my burrito? Right? But this is how we've been conditioned to this point. Man, I have to wait how long in the drive-thru? Oh my gosh. Let me call the police. I've been here 10 minutes. This is ridiculous. We settle for the immediate when we could be looking forward to the eternal. I want to go back to those 40 countries once more. Because they don't settle for the immediate. If they settled for the immediate, what would be the point of living? They face persecution, they face death, they face imprisonment and torture just for opening a Bible. They're settling for the immediate. They are not settling for the immediate. They are looking forward with hope to eternity. So what do you and I look forward to? Because the immediate is hopeless. The immediate means that here and now is all that we get, all that we look forward to. The immediate is the flesh. Eternity is where the Spirit resides. Again, from John Eldridge, asking, have we dreamed better dreams than God can dream? We've written stories that have a better ending than God has provided? It cannot be. What are you hoping in? Because there is hope. But I'm not convinced that we all are looking to it. I'm not convinced that we're all seeing the full extent of God's promise, because so many of us settle for these small little dreams. We settle for the immediate. Verse 25. But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. So here's the hard part. That we do hope, we look forward to. Maybe you already have it in your heart what eternity is, but you have to wait for it. Instant gratification is not the way that God works. Much as I love the microwave, I don't think God invented it. We have to wait with patience. Now, I've worked in children's ministry for several years, and one of the ways that we try and teach kids patience is the idea that patience is waiting with a happy heart, right? So patience isn't just waiting. You know, if you have ever asked your kids to be patient on something, and I'm going to look at Anthony Noto because I have seen you ask your kids to wait, and there's just grumbling and complaining, and Anthony's kids are really good, but there have been times where I have seen anybody's children just kind of sit there and grumble and complain, right? That is not waiting with a happy heart. That is not patience. Man, I wish that God would just get here with eternity. Jesus, why aren't you back yet? That's not waiting with a happy heart. I also want to tell you that patience is not idleness. We get this idea that, well, maybe if we have the right heart, we can just wait. We can wait to hear from the Lord, and God's going to bring it eventually, and we'll be all right. We can get through this, right? There are so many people in the church today that believe that if they can just hold on until Jesus gets back, just hold on, we'll get through this. And this is true. We will get through this. You have to hold on, but that can't be your focus. Let me go back to Matthew 25. Again, this promise of inheriting the kingdom prepared from the foundation of the world. The passage continues, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." Patience is not idleness. Yes, we wait with a happy heart, but we don't wait sitting on our hands. I think there are a lot of us in here who probably have had some times where we are waiting, sitting on our hands. I invite you, share the hope. If you call Jesus Lord, this is your opportunity to share the hope with others in practical ways. Certainly, let's tell people about Jesus, but let's not just stop at words. Let's let our faith be seen in action by visiting those who are in prison, who are sick, by providing for the poor. Again, I invite you, there are 40 countries in the world where it's illegal to be a Christian. What can you do to support them? And I get that everybody's financial picture is different. Maybe you don't have the ability to send a check, but you know what? Sometimes that's better. Sometimes sending a check is a cop-out. Sometimes you need to pour your sweat and your blood into what's happening. You need to get on your knees and pray. Because if we truly believe in this hope, why aren't we sharing it? Why are we settling for the immediate when the hope is for so much more? Why are we letting others settle for the immediate? Are you desperate for God to do something in your life? Are you desperate for God to do something in someone else's life? Share the hope with them. The hope that this world is not all that there is. There is more to come, and it is better than any one of us could have ever dreamed. Now, if you're sitting in this room today and you don't know Jesus, do you have hope? What are you looking forward to? Is it man, I'm looking forward to lunch. Had enough of hearing this guy speak. I hope that's not the case. If God is stirring in your heart right now, now is the time to respond. In a moment, we're going to have our prayer teams up front. We would love to connect with you. We'd love to pray with you. If you are in a place where you say, I have been living in the immediate for far too long, and I am ready to receive the hope that God has for me, today is the day. Don't get stuck in that seat. Don't think that maybe next time. Because living in the immediate is hopeless. Now, finally, I want to speak to the idea to not lose hope. Because you may be in this room, you may know the Lord. You may have relationship with Him and love others who love Him. But man, it's hard sometimes. When you lose a family member, when you find your spouse cheating on you, when you keep going back to the bottle again and again. Is there hope? There is. I can promise you that. There is hardship, but there is hope. Don't lose hope. Jesus promised this. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." And this last one is heavy on my heart with these 40 countries. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I want to invite you today to live in hope, to live in expectation. What we have here and now is not worth settling for. Dylan's going to play for us for just a couple minutes. If you have a prayer request, please come up front. I'm going to have our prayer teams come up front now. We would love to pray with you. We'd love to pray with you to encourage you to share the hope. If you don't have hope, we would love to pray with you and help you receive the Lord Jesus. And man, sometimes, if things just feel hopeless, you need somebody by your side, and we all do. This is how God set up His church. So if God is speaking to you in this moment, please come forward. For those of you that maybe God is already challenging you in these areas, maybe you're ready to go out. Maybe you're ready to go change that world. Maybe you're ready to go share the hope. Then go change your world. We love you guys. I'm so thankful that you're here this morning. We'll see you at your community groups throughout the week, and we'll see you back here next Sunday. If you need prayer, please come forward.